Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Saturday Night Live and Philosophy, Deep Thoughts Through the Decades. Edited by William Irwin, Jason Southworth, and Ruth Tallman. Narrated by Patrick Lawlor and Randye Kaye. Cold Open. The Introduction. Most of us can identify television programs that shaped and defined us as we grew up. They were the backdrop of our experiences of first loves, first apartments, minimum wage jobs, and bad breakups. In addition to being personally meaningful, pop cultural artworks such as TV shows often contribute to the collective consciousness of a generation, helping us understand our peers as set apart from those older and younger than ourselves. Owing to its exceptional longevity, Saturday Night Live, SNL, has helped define not a generation, but multiple generations of viewers. The young fans who stayed up late to see the land shark and the killer bees went on to share the joys of the Spartan cheerleaders and the Ambiguously Gay Duo with their own children. Now those same fans are watching Morning Joe and Eric and Donald Trump Jr. with their grandkids. We can date ourselves based on who we consider our update hosts, and most of us see the decade of our own adolescence as the golden age of the show. Despite our disagreements, we're unified in that none of us can recall the major news events of our lives without also thinking about the ways we saw them lampooned on Saturday nights. We sit down to watch and keep coming back for the laughs. But SNL has done more than just entertain us for the past 4.5 decades. Like philosophy itself, SNL has challenged us to view our world with a critical and questioning eye. Kids can laugh long before they're capable of engaging in critical analysis. Thanks to SNL's use of parody and satire, those of us who grew up watching the show were wired to think philosophically by the time our brains caught up to the task. This book takes us further down that road, with a careful, deliberate look at the philosophy that is laced throughout 4.5 decades of SNL sketches, impressions, and fake news. Happy listening, and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Part 1. The Opening Monologue. 1. Chase's Ford versus Belushi's Samurai. Why is it okay to punch up, but not down? Ruth Tallman. Since its inception, SNL has displayed a willingness, even eagerness, to take comedic shots at public figures, and it seems no status is so exalted as to earn someone a pass. No sitting president has been immune from SNL's mockery, and in recent election cycles, all major contenders for the White House have been lampooned as well. Supreme Court justices have taken their turns, as have senators and congresspeople. Popes, heck, even Jesus Christ himself, have been the subject of SNL's playful mirth. The question we'll consider in this chapter is, why do we find this acceptable? Why does no one mind that irreverent young comedians don funny wigs and makeup to poke fun at political and religious leaders on national television? Where's the respect? We'll also consider how it could be that sometimes a joke that targets people who aren't that powerful at all seems to violate moral norms in a way that jokes targeting the most powerful among us do not. Radical autonomism. Ethical comedy might sound like an oxymoron. Many people hold the belief that if it's part of a comedic act, it's somehow immune to moral criticism. This view has deep roots in aesthetics or the philosophy of art. Radical autonomism is the position that moral categories simply do not apply to works of art, and that only aesthetic categories are appropriate. The British art critic Clive Bell, 1881 to 1964, was a strong proponent of autonomism. On this view, the purpose of a work of art is to stimulate aesthetic responses in the audience. Aesthetic emotions are necessarily good on this view, so a work of art is good or bad to the extent that it does or does not produce aesthetic emotions in the audience. Generally, the aesthetic emotion a work of comedic art is aimed at producing is humor. Thus, the grounds by which it would be appropriate to judge the work would simply be, is it funny? On the other hand, is it mean, hurtful, or disrespectful are inappropriate questions to ask about a work of art. Autonomism sees art as set apart from ordinary life and its rules. What might be negatively judged in the real world due to moral considerations gets a pass when it's presented as part of a work of art. While this may sound a bit strange, consider how different our reaction might have been if, in an interview, Chevy Chase described sitting President General Ford as a bumbling idiot who couldn't walk across a room without tripping over his own feet. This sounds harsh and disrespectful, particularly when said of a president while in office. Yet isn't that exactly the sentiment Chase conveyed each Saturday night as he stumbled across the stage in the character of President Ford? Autonomism stems from the belief that there is something very valuable, even sacred, about art and its role in our lives. Works of art provide us with a space where we can play imaginatively with ideas that might be better shied away from in real life. Placing art in a realm in which it may remain immune from moral criticism allows artists to fully develop their creativity. Art thereby creates a safe space in which both artist and audience can explore radical ideas without causing harm in the real world. We can engage in imaginative exploration in fiction without carrying out those ideas into reality, where they might cause harm. Because art is, by its very nature, not reality, we can allow what would be morally reprehensible in real life to simply be awesome aesthetic fun in a work of art. It's a mindset of radical autonomism that allows us to evaluate, for instance, Debbie as a great comedic character, while recognizing that were she to exist in real life, she would be, well, a downer. Radical moralism. The flip side of radical autonomism is known as radical moralism. The Russian author Leo Tolstoy, 1828 to 1910, was a proponent of this view, which holds that art is good insofar as it promotes good values, and bad to the extent that it promotes bad values. Unlike autonomism, which says aesthetic evaluations are entirely distinct from moral evaluations, radical moralism holds that it's impossible to separate the two. So an artwork that promotes immoral beliefs would necessarily be a bad work of art. There's no way for its aesthetic qualities to redeem it because radical moralists hold that moral values supersede aesthetic ones. An obvious complication of this view is that we don't all agree about what constitutes a moral or an immoral belief. Tolstoy had some ideas about this. He saw social inclusivity as good and elitism and social division as bad. To the extent that high presidential approval ratings promote social unity, then, depictions of the two presidents Bush by Dana Carvey and Will Ferrell, by most accounts far more lovable in their comedic hands than in real life, would arguably receive high moralist ranks from Tolstoy. Radical moralism traces its roots back to Plato, who was all too aware of art's power to sway the hearts of its audience. It was the very power of art that scared Plato silly as he saw art working through emotion, paving the way for Bell and Tolstoy rather than reason, making it much less controllable or dependable than Plato would like. Plato worried that a rousing work of art could prompt a riot or give credence to a view or a leader not worthy of rational endorsement, an accusation that has been leveled against the role of Ferrell's Bush character in the re-election of George W. Bush. Tolstoy seemed to share this worry with Plato, although he was happy to use the emotional efficacy of art to noble advantage, seeing art as having great power to bring about social good. Moderate moralism. Splitting the difference between radical autonomism and radical moralism is the view known as moderate moralism, endorsed by contemporary aesthetician Noel Carroll. On this view, moral considerations ought to be applied when evaluating a work of art, but so too should aesthetic considerations, and the significant weight of either could override the other. For instance, a work with troubling moral implications could be so aesthetically captivating that it causes us to forgive or look past its moral failings. A work with particularly weighty moral sins might be unable to muster the aesthetic wherewithal to overcome its morally complicating elements. Moderate moralistic considerations are probably in the background when we allow ourselves to snicker at morally questionable jokes on the grounds that they are, in fact, quite funny, while being unwilling to extend the same generosity to a morally questionable joke that is hack or otherwise unfunny. Who is the butt of the joke? Although there are plenty of radical autonomists in the world today, it's hard for many people to engage with a work of art such as Saturday Night Live without considering the moral dimensions of its sketches, particularly when those sketches portray characters who have real-life counterparts, who are presumably subject to moral evaluation, even if the art that portrays them might not be, according to an autonomist. How would a moralist, particularly a moderate moralist, go about evaluating the aesthetic and moral elements of a work of art, in this case in an SNL sketch? A good starting point is to ask, is there a butt of the joke? Not all jokes have butts. Sketches such as Toonsis the Driving Cat do not obviously target anyone. They're just absurd. To determine if the joke has a butt, ask, is there someone we're laughing at? Let's think about some examples. The butt of an impressionist joke is usually pretty straightforwardly whoever they are doing an impression of. So the butt of a typical Chase as Ford pratfall is Gerald Ford, and the butt of Carvey's famous Read My Lips antics is George H.W. Bush. When we talk about punching up and punching down, the person who's being punched is the butt of the joke. So who is it okay to punch? To answer this question, we need to think about the various individuals and groups involved. We need to ask not just who is the butt, but also who is the butt in relation to the audience and to society. And as we learned on the playground as kids, we should pick on someone our own size. Only bullies, who are actually weak cowards, pick on people who are smaller than them. This is what it means to punch down. But this isn't about physical size. Otherwise, way more people would be fair game for Jane Curtin's jokes, as she's only 5'4", than would be for Chevy Chase, who comes in at 6'4". No, the real issue is something more like social status. Let's think about this first in terms of individuals and their social status, generally celebrities versus the rest of us, and then in terms of members of groups that hold varying levels of social status. Public figures. The Clintons. There seems to be something in our nature that renders us fascinated with celebrity. We love to observe and judge the lives of public figures. Perhaps it's our, often false, understanding of their lives as easy, glamorous, and exciting in ways that we wish our own were. Maybe it's a craving for the fame the celebrities themselves often seem to want to escape. Or maybe it's simply that we wish we had the wealth that fame often carries with it. SNL impressions are generally of celebrities, if for no other reason than that, for an impression to succeed, the audience must be familiar with its subject, and celebrities can serve as cultural touchstones. Celebrities are usually understood as fair game for comedians for a couple of reasons. First, there's the view that, since they chose their role as public figures, by seeking public office or by pursuing careers as entertainers or in other high-profile professions, they in some sense asked for it, or at the very least, chose to accept a life that would include it. Additionally, there is the belief that most celebrities can take it. Because celebrities are famous, rich, and powerful, targeting a celebrity with a joke is usually punching up. Comedians, while sometimes holding celebrity status themselves, do not hold anywhere near the status of, say, the president. So the comedian, holding a subordinate position in society relative to the butt of the joke, punches up, taking a shot at the person in power. And when that happens, the audience, comprised of individuals who share that subordinate position, cheers. It's not about hating the butt of the joke or wishing that person harm. There is simply something deeply psychologically satisfying about seeing a powerful person brought down through laughter. It reduces the gap between them and us. The joke slightly depowers the powerful person by transferring that power to the audience who laughs. Punching up can be affectionate. Comedians enjoy lampooning their heroes. That's the whole idea behind a roast, for instance. Public figures often tacitly acknowledge that they understand their role as comedic fodder to be friendly, accepting offers to appear on the show alongside their SNL doppelgangers. There are many examples of this. Some particularly memorable ones are Hillary Clinton joining Amy Poehler on stage in matching pantsuits, and Sarah Palin coming face-to-face with her double, played by Tina Fey. But at other times, the comedy is intended to question or even condemn the behavior of its target. When that target holds a powerful position, however, they are arguably not harmed by this comedic calling out. It makes us feel better about situations we don't like and have relatively little power to change, and the butt of the joke remains unharmed. Moralists, radical and moderate, will have little objection to comedy such as this that punches up. Not all public figures meet the criteria outlined, however. Some do not choose to be public figures, and they're not all powerful. Prime examples of this are the children of celebrities, thrust into the limelight by the decisions of their parents, and as kids, necessarily pretty vulnerable in an adult world. When her father decided to run for president, preteen Chelsea Clinton became a household name. Young Clinton, 12 years old at the time, was the butt of a 1992 Wayne's World sketch, Season 18, Episode 8, that was subsequently removed from rebroadcasts of the show, with apologies from Lorne Michaels and Mike Myers. SNL had punched down, targeting a child who, while a public figure, had not chosen the role, and who certainly stood to be harmed as a shy teen whose appearance was being scrutinized on national television by two of the most famous men in comedy at the time. SNL seemed to realize, after the fact, unfortunately, that there's a big difference between punching up at an adult Clinton who has chosen to be a powerful public figure and punching down at a teenage Clinton who is neither powerful nor purposely public. Group membership, The Delicious Dish, and Samurai Futaba. While SNL impressions focus on individuals, public figures who are recognizable to the audience, sketches featuring SNL original characters often appeal based on their ability to capture the essence of a type of person or a group of people. Often the type of person targeted by these kinds of characters is innocuous. Sketches featuring Bill Swirsky's superfans poke fun at sports fanatics, while the sweater-wearing hosts of The Delicious Dish nail what it means to be on Team Public Radio. Targeting these types seems relatively unobjectionable, due partly to the fact that membership in fan groups and interest groups is optional. People choose to be fans and public radio listeners. More problematic are characters that target based on group membership that is unchosen, groups based on race, ethnicity, country of origin, sexual orientation, gender identification, disability, and sometimes religion, and that is deeply connected with one's identity. John Belushi's Samurai Futaba sketches are more cringy than funny to modern sensibilities because the butt of the joke is Belushi's fictitious futaba, a stand-in for a stereotypical 1970s American understanding of a Japanese person. There's no social commentary or deeper meaning, just a white guy in a bathrobe swinging a katana and making fun of the sound of the Japanese language. Targeting members of groups based on unchosen, identity-forming inclusion in those groups is morally objectionable, partially for the same reason it's ethically suspect to target children based on who their parents are. In both cases, a person becomes the subject of attack, even if it's a light-hearted comedic attack without any sort of choice that led them to be in that spotlight. When the comedy stems from stereotypes surrounding language, clothing, and behavior, life for members of that group becomes a little harder. It is doubtful that Belushi and the writers of the samurai sketches intended any harm to Japanese or Japanese-American people with the sketches, and it's unlikely that great harm occurred. But this is still an example of punching down, as individuals from a minority group in this country, probably already hassled for their accents and other differences, were the butt of a joke made by and predominantly for members of the dominant group, white Americans. Targeting as a means of elevating Lunch Lady Land. Part of the beauty and genius of art generally, and comedy in particular, is that it's not always straightforward. Great comedy is capable of remarkable nuance, and sometimes the intended message is not what one might think at first glance. There's a certain kind of comedian who recognizes the power that comes from their platform and chooses to use that platform to elevate those who have less social status or less power in society, to lift them up rather than to punch them down. Chris Farley's Lunch Lady character, with Adam Sandler's accompanying song, is a prime example of comedic targeting as a way of elevating and celebrating members of a group that have little social status or power and who receive far less respect than they deserve. School cafeteria workers are underpaid, underappreciated, and put up with plenty of crap from ill-mannered school kids. Farley and Sandler, rather than taking cheap shots at members of a group who already get plenty of grief, pay tribute to these previously unsung individuals who play a really important role in the daily lives of children. Amidst the psychedelic imagery of clouds made of carrots and peas, mountains built of shepherd's pie, and rivers made of macaroni and cheese, we're reminded that these workers provide children who might otherwise be having a hard, lonely day with food served with a little slice of love. In a world where many children face food insecurity at home, everybody gets enough food down here in Lunch Lady Land. Farley and Sandler's sketch calls us to reflect on the value of the individuals who kept our bellies full during what may have been some very hard years in our own young lives, and reminds us to appreciate the role these workers currently play in the lives of our own children. The lives of lunch ladies get better, not worse, as a result of this sketch. Moralists would approve. When the subject is not the butt. Schmidt's Gay Beer. The subject of a joke is not always the butt of a joke. Remember, a joke with a butt is at the butt's expense. It's who we're laughing at. But sometimes, remember, good jokes are often subtle. The butt of the joke is not seen or directly referenced. And what's more, the butt doesn't have to be a person or a group of people. Societal norms can also be the target of jokes, as is the case in this next example. The faux commercial for Schmidt's Gay Beer once again features the Farley and Sandler duo, along with a handful of hot, dripping wet beefcakes. But the butt of this sketch is not gay people. Rather, the sketch is full of standard beer commercial tropes. Farley and Sandler are two impossibly lucky guys. Because the beer is so great, it turns a dirty, dry swimming pool into a sexual mecca with close-ups on gorgeous, near-naked bodies, all there for these men's enjoyment. Drink this beer, the message seems to be, and you too will become irresistible to human beings who are being portrayed as sex objects. This was a standard commercial message at the time, and today for that matter, but viewers were, and are, so numb to it that the exploitation doesn't even register for a lot of people. The Schmidt's gay sketch jolts viewers out of their complacency by replacing the usual, socially acceptable sex objects, large-breasted women in bikinis, with large-penised men in Speedos, not to ridicule gay people, but to point out that the shock we feel in seeing the blatant objectification of male bodies is a shock that we ought to feel when we see the same level of objectification of female bodies. The butt of the joke, then, is not gay people at all, but the advertising industry, as well as all of us who buy into it without questioning its heteronormativity and sexually exploitive tactics. Schmidt's gay thus punches up, not down. Once again, moralists would approve. With these concepts in hand, the next time you watch SNL, take a moment to reflect. Who is the butt of the joke, if there is one? Does that person hold a position of power in society, or is that person a member of a dominant societal group? Does the answer to those questions affect your response to the joke? If so, you're probably a radical or moderate moralist. If not, you just might be a radical autonomist. Either way, having the tools to engage in an ethical analysis of your meta-response to the art can enrich your ability to engage with the material in a more philosophical way.
2. Mr. Mike, the dark existentialist vision of Michael O'Donoghue. Eric Christensen. Known for his dark, disturbing brand of comedy, which he had perfected at National Lampoon, Michael O'Donoghue was the first head writer for Saturday Night Live. He wasn't just a writer, though. In front of the SNL camera, as Mr. Mike, he told least-loved bedtime tales that reflected themes of meaninglessness, suffering, and death from the existentialist philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980. As we'll hear, despite the darkness, O'Donoghue and Sartre ultimately offer hope. Absurdity. In a 1945 lecture, Sartre gave a short programmatic statement defining existentialism, or at least his version of existentialism. He said that for human beings, existence precedes essence. The essence of something is the trait that makes it what it is. It's whatever makes something, for example, a rock, rather than a plant or an animal. But for conscious beings like humans, essence isn't something we're born with. This is why subjectivity must be our point of departure. Subjective beings like us are always making decisions about what we're going to do, which end up being decisions about what we will be. Thus, we are always being formed by our individual and collective choices. For Sartre, this is the logical consequence of atheism. If God made me, then I already know what I am, and therefore what my life means. This is because, in order to create me, God had to already have had an idea of what I am and what my purpose would be. This is true of anything that is created. The person who made the coffee cup that I'm drinking out of had to have an idea of what it was and what it was for in order to have made it at all. But if the world wasn't created by God, then the world doesn't come equipped with purpose, values, and meaning. Things in the universe just exist without being part of a grand plan that would make them meaningful. For Sartre and for aesthetic existentialists in general, this idea is very liberating. It means that I get to decide what my life is going to mean, rather than be told by some supernatural being or his purported human representative. Rather than needing to discover values, we get to create them, like an artist creating her work. For Sartre, just because the universe has no inherent meaning doesn't imply that it's meaningless. Rather, it's up to us to create meaning. But for many people, the prospect of a universe of bare existence with no purpose or values built into it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?